All okay?
Yeah, all okay. All okay.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Manto Matters. We have with us Professor Emeritus Harish Narang, Dr. Gurupdesh Singh, and for doing a very special reading today, we have Deepshika Khera. When we were finalizing our plans for October, the idea was to put center stage some difficult to confront questions and also issues that are perhaps somewhat contentious. And so we began with a talk by Magsaysay award-winning journalist, writer, academic, activist, archivist, documenter, P. Sainath. And what a riveting eye-opener of a talk that was. On Gandhi Jayanti, October the 2nd, we perhaps needed to hear the hard truths about a largely ignored and neglected sector, rural India and its farmers. The fact that the Indian Parliament had just passed the farmers' bills meant that it was a topic that was in the eye of a storm, with farmers in many parts of the country out on the roads. Today, we are going to talk about Manto, a figure who towers head and shoulders above writers of his generation, tackling subjects that are difficult, horrifying, shocking, even obscene. And he takes them on without mincing words, without apology, hitting his reader hard between the eyes. His story centering around partition, often about those living on the edge, about prostitutes and courtesans, drunks, gamblers. Always his eye was unerring, it was precise, and it was honest. But there was also a great deal of empathy in what he saw and what he wrote. What he wrote about was often the dregs of society, the forgotten, those who live on society's margins. But never did he do it with cruelty. It was always with an innate kind of sympathy. It was not in Mumbai or Lahore that partition's best known storyteller wrote his first story. It was in Amritsar, where he wrote his story Tamasha based on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. He called Amritsar home and he lived here from his early childhood till 1936 when he left for Bombay. Today, there remains not a hint of him in this city. No memorial, no monument, no remembrance of one of the greatest, bravest, most fierce writers of his time. He lived here for some 24 years. His house was located in Katra Jaimal Singh. However, today there is no trace of that home in that locality. His partition stories stand out. Who can fail to be moved by his masterpieces like Thanda Gosht, Holdo, Toba Tek Singh, etc. It is this quality of being brave and of being truthful and not flinching from harsh reality that he saw around him, for trying to prick the conscience of his fellow citizens, of showing often a mirror to the ugliness and the bestiality, the horror that existed around him. And of course, it was his fantastic writing that we decided that we wanted him in this session, in this month's sessions. I'd like to now hand over to Dr. Gurupdesh Singh, former professor of English at GNDU, former director, Academic Staff College. He's an academic, he's a writer and a translator. And I'd like him to now please take this evening's talk forward to introduce Professor Harish Narang and to then invite him to speak. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here with us this evening. Dr. Gurupdesh.
This beautiful introduction to the author. I think nothing more can be said about his great writings. The only thing is that during his own time, he was notorious for doing something which was understood as obscene or probably not very politically correct. I think Dr. Narang would introduce us to this in details very shortly. But before we get on to that, let me just say a few words about him. He is a professor and he is a retired professor. He's not only
Doctor, just a moment. I think you need to be a little more closer to the internet because your voice was cracking. So I would request you to repeat what you said.
Hello, have you been able to understand me now?
No, you are not
Is it
audible.
clear now?
You are not audible, sir.
Is it clear?
Yeah, it's better now. I think probably you turn off your camera for a moment.
Just give me a minute then. I think let me go to the. No,
So
it's not the camera. I think, is it okay now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, select the speaker. Is it better now?
Yeah,
Are you able to hear now?
yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, please better go ahead, sir.
Yeah, better.
Okay. I'm sorry for this. Dr. Narang, I was talking about, is not only a teacher, he has been an activist also, and a prominent and very popular teacher amongst academics. The important thing is that he's always been interested in the marginalized areas of our life and in literature also. He did the same thing. He has been interested in Canadian literature. He's been interested in African literature and the South, say, Asian literature. It's only because he is more interested in the underprivileged. That includes also women and Dalit studies. He has published more than 20 books and a translator. And he has done translations of one of the very important Canadian writers called M.G. Wasanji. He has also translated Chinua Achebe. And most importantly, he has translated a full-length book on Manto. This is the book you can see. This book is published by Sahityaka Academy, and you can see he calls this book Manto, My Love. That shows the passion that he has for this writer. Not only this, my dear, he is also a creative writer himself and published 2 books of short stories, Pakistani Bache and Sunte Hain Seher Hogi. We have been friends for a long time. I think I don't have to introduce this moment to introduce us to Manto. Now, friends, Manto is, to my mind, I think, known for only 2 things. One is that he wrote Toba Tek Singh. And the second, that is very notorious for his obscene or controversial stories. We will have both of these things in plenty during this discussion. Before anything else, I would ask Dr. Narang to tell us something about, he has lived here for a long time. I also read a lot about Amritsar in his stories. There are particular references to the locations in his stories. I would ask Dr. Narang to start his talk by telling us about his connection to Amritsar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Narang, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
So you need to be a little more close to the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
You are.
Well, friends, good evening. Before I speak about what I've been ordered to speak, I must thank Maja House. I must thank my friend Gurupdesh Singh and Ms. Preeti Gill for inviting me and to be with you all this evening. To be honest, the very introductory remarks by Preeti ji and Gurupdesh sum up for whatever I want to say. There is very little that is left for me to say. Okay, friends, I want to start, as has been suggested, to talk about Manto's life vis-a-vis Amritsar. You see, Manto himself has written very little about his life in Amritsar. There are scanty references here and there, and so have his critics. They mentioned this fact that he was not born here, being a Kashmiri. He was not born in Kashmir. He was born in Samrala. He was born on 11th of May, 1912. But he spent most of his life in Amritsar. It is from his writings, particularly sketches. Sketches like the one on Aga Hashr Kashmiri, on Maulana Abdul Bari, that we can cull out certain facts about his association with Amritsar. His father was a munsif, that is a kind of sub-judge, a legal person, and they lived in Kucha Wakila. His father was a very strict father, which we make out from one small stray reference that he makes, that when he was in class 7 or 8, he and his friends had set up some kind of a drama club, and they used to rehearse in his house in that street. And one day his father came to know about it. He came and he threw about all the instruments and the various things that are needed for rehearsing a drama, and told them that these were absolutely worthless activities. Friends, we don't know much about where he studied in Amritsar, except that he says he matriculated from a school there after failing twice. After failing twice. And by his own admission, after he matriculated, he did nothing, literally nothing, and became a drifter. That's what he himself says. He says for hours together, his friend Hassan Abbas and Anwar painter and Ashik photographer, they would just roam the streets of Amritsar, the bazaars and the streets of Amritsar, literally doing nothing. It is around that time that he really fell into a company which was not very desirable. There was a fellow called Dinu or Fazlu Kumhar who had a shop in Katra Jaimal Singh. And on top of his shop, in one of the rooms, was held regularly gambling activities. And somehow Manto happened to gravitate there. And he got involved himself in gambling by his own admission so much that he says even at night, I would dream of sequences and trails. Well, that's how he was trying to waste his life, as he puts it. And after a while, he got fed up from this and he tried to look for something else. There was a well-known meeting place for people who had anything to do with culture, with poetry reading, with writing, with music, with singing. And this place was a place called Jijeka Hotel, Shiraz Hotel, Jijeka Hotel. And it is there that Manto started frequenting and started taking part in gossipy politics or whatever was discussed there. And it is here, to his good luck, he happened to meet someone. His name was Maulana Abdul Bari, who had just been appointed the editor of daily newspaper which was coming out from Amritsar, Masawwar. And Manto first listened to Bari Sahab and Haji Laklak, who came to Jijeda Hotel and would discuss everything. Soon he started participating.
Naring sir, may I interrupt for a moment, please? There is a little problem with your voice, so you need to be
audio.
There's a little problem with the audio. You need to be more closer to the mic so that we can, hear you properly.
Okay. You should have
so
told
sorry.
me.
I'm so sorry I have interrupted.
No, that's fine. Am I any better?
Yes, you are better now.
Arvinder, the voice is perfectly good for me. I don't know, there must be some other reason for
You
Well,
can ask the others. You can ask the others if I'm audible. You can ask Preeti ji. You can ask the
no,
others.
I'm getting feedback from a lot of audience, the participants.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. But
Yeah.
tell me now, I really
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Better now. Better now.
Okay.
So as I said, there was a very popular meeting place called Jijeda Hotel, which was also known as Hotel Shiraz, where a lot of journalists, writers, poets, singers gravitated, and they gossiped, and they also talked of politics and other things. This was a kind of cultural hub for ordinary people in Amritsar. That's where Manto went and met Maulana Abdul Bari, who had become the editor of a daily newspaper called Masabat, which came out from Amritsar. Meeting him changed the life of Manto. In his own words, whatever he is today, he talked of that time. Whatever I am today and whatever place I have reached, Bari Saab has played a very important role in my life.
Okay.
Because Bari Saab told him a few things and weaned him away from Katra Jaimal Singh kind of activities. He gave him small tidbits to write in his newspaper and soon asked him to write a regular column on films. Let's remember at that point of time, Lahore was a big center of film activities. So people had a lot of interest in film. But as you know, writing for films was primarily gossipy. And Manto wasn't very happy about it. So what he did was, he asked Bari Saab if he could do something else. And by sheer accident, one day when Bari Saab had come to his place, he saw a book there in his house, which was, by Victor Hugo. The book was called The Last Days of the Condemned. Some of us are familiar.
Yeah.
Bari Saab read it and was so impressed that possibly he read it in one go. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
It's
Yes.
breaking.
Read it in one go and told Manto to translate it into Urdu. Now, by his own admission, Manto says that although he had matriculated with Urdu as a subject, he still made quite a many mistakes in Urdu. In fact, later when he went to Aligarh University, he mentions himself that I failed in Urdu. Imagine, that's what he had
failed.
formally trained himself like that.
Yeah.
But what he did was, with the help of dictionaries and certain other things, he managed to translate that book into Urdu. Bari Saab edited it and also had it published.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
was published as Sar Guzashte Asir.
Mhm.
And in Manto's own words, he became a Sahib-e-Kitab,
Okay.
a writer with a book.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naran. I think we should get on to the main part of his writings. That
Give me
is-
1 minute to say, although this fact has been mentioned by Preeti ji, his first story was published in 1934, which is based on Amritsar, which is on the Jallianwala Bagh, and it is called Tamasha.
I
But
know.
it is very different from many other stories and narratives and discourses on the Jallianwala Bagh, because he used the lens of a little child to look at the
Yes.
tragic events,
Yeah.
which was very unique and which gave us enough hint that whatever was to come in future from Manto, in terms of content and in terms of entering a discourse, he would be very unique and different from us.
Thank you. I think everybody knows that Manto is more known for his partition stories. And most importantly, I think everybody knows about Toba Tek Singh. You too have mentioned this story as one of the best 10 stories in the world. We would like you to just tell us about this story and the other partition stories that you think are very crucial to his works?
Well, ask anyone who has heard the name of Manto and said, have you heard anything besides his name? They said Toba Tek Singh.
Toba Tek Singh, right?
Yes. You see, Toba Tek Singh and Manto at one point of time became synonymous. In fact, as I will try and maybe show a little later, Toba Tek Singh became a metaphor for Manto.
Yeah.
If I were to list 10 great stories written by humans at any given point of time in history,
No.
Toba Tek Singh would certainly be one of those. Toba Tek Singh has been both fair and unfair to Manto. It has been fair to Manto because in it, he created a discourse which went straight to the heart of the people. And look at the choice. Remember when the partition killings were at their most horrific, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, our people have gone mad. I don't know if Manto knew about those observations by Pandit Nehru, but he certainly thought if in this madness he had to find sanity, it could only be found, in Manto houses, in mad houses.
Yeah.
And so he went there. The kind of questions that Bishan Singh and fellow residents of the madhouse raise are the only sane questions that could be asked in that mayhem. And therefore, Manto's very choice of locating his story in a madhouse. In fact, later on, if I have time, I'll make a small remark that Manto himself is Bishan Singh, is represented like that because at one point of time, the questions that Toba Tek Singh asked were asked by Manto of himself. Well, that is one reason why Manto has become synonymous with that, because the discourse, the manner in which it is located, the manner in which it is created, shows sanity had gone for a toss and you had to stand on your head, which Bishan Singh literally does quite often, to look at the world in the right perspective. That I have looked at the Manto partition discourse by so many people. I'm sure you have also. Krishna Sopti, Yashpal, Vishnu Sani, Kurtulan Haidar, Khushwant Singh, some of these. And I have not come across even one having thought of a location or a narration like that. But it has been very unjust to Manto also, Toba Tek Singh, because Manto has written so much else, which is of great significance. His essays, his sketches, his shorter stories, and yet people remember him only by one story. I would like to mention a couple of other partition stories, particularly a longish story called Moselle. I don't know if you have read about it. It's a story about a Sikh girl caught in the riots in Bombay. And the interesting thing is, when she's caught there and her parents have unfortunately been killed, and she's about to be killed herself, perhaps maybe raped also. At that point of time, she is saved by a Jewish girl who sacrifices her life to save her. Now try and think, sir, a Muslim writer making a Jewish girl the center of his story, partition stories. I haven't seen any other. There are other stories like Darling, Titwal Ka Kutta. There is Thanda Gosht, of course, one of the very great stories. There is Kholdo, of course. There is another story, I forget its title. It is also located in Amritsar, where an old woman is looking for one of his very beautiful daughters. And she is finally told that she is dead because someone has seen her going with a very handsome Sikh gentleman whom she has married. And this would have killed the old woman. So they say she's already dead. So Manto has, and of course I must mention, give me a minute, Siyah Hashiye. Siyah Hashiye, those capsule stories are perhaps unparalleled in the history of partition literature. Give me 1 minute to give you one example. The capsule story is called Ghate Ka Sauda. Two men go and buy a girl for the night from a pimp, and the whole night they are doing all kinds of atrocious things on her. In the morning, one of the fellows asks the girl, "What's your name?" And when she tells the name, he runs to his friend. He says, forgive me the language, Haramzade ne hamare saath dhokha kiya hai. He has given a girl from another religion than the one we asked for. Let's go, return the girl and get our money back. Look at Manto's humanism. Look at the slap he gives. He doesn't tell us what is the religion of the men. He doesn't tell us what is the religion of the pimp. He doesn't tell us what is the religion of the girl. He doesn't tell us anything about that. And yet, how powerful a discourse. There are many others in Siyah Hashiye, but I thought I will just highlight that. This is Manto's partition discourse, which to my mind remains the most poignant.
Would you like to tell us something about his own political views about or his own understanding of the entire rioting and raping and the carnage that he saw? What kinds of views he held about these things?
You see, Manto wrote, of course, about partition atrocities in person, and he also created characters. Look at Thanda Gosht for a second. In his Vashat, the guy rapes a dead body.
Yes.
The guy rapes a dead body. In one of his stories, Sahai, he tells us through the mouth of a character that millions were killed. Millions of Hindus, millions of Muslims were killed in the hope, in the fond hope that with this they were killing the religion, they were finishing off the religion, whether it was Hindu or whether it was Muslim. But he says, how stupid, nothing has happened to them. He was trying to say that this killing in the name of religion was absolutely senseless. Not only that, you look at what happens to Sirajuddin's daughter Sakina in Kholdo. We are going to listen to that story. Yes. That girl, Manto shows, and he had the courage of conviction, shows that she was raped by her own co-religionists, the Razakars, who had actually found her, and without bringing her to Sirajuddin, had abused her. And I want to point out here, he had seen at first hand whatever was happening during the riots in Bombay. I've mentioned the story Moselle where he tries to portray it, but in his sketch, one of his most important sketches, that of Ashok Kumar, he tells you what all was happening there. And this was responsible for Manto leaving for Pakistan. In fact, he tells us one day when Ashok in his car was going to leave him at his place, they got caught in a riot melee in a street where Muslims were killing Hindus. And Manto said, my God, they won't spare Ashok. He's a Hindu and his blood would be on my head. To his horror, they not only spared him, they showed him the way how to escape. But Manto was so perturbed by that, he says, "Main patli gali se nikal ke Pakistan chala aaya."
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think it's a very touching discourse. Dr. Narang, we'll take a break here, short break, and I think we'll ask our friend Deepshikha Khera now to read the story, this very famous story, Kholdo. It's one of the controversial stories, but I think we will leave it to the audience to decide what.
Why controversial? It's a great story. This controversy is far beyond us now.
Yes. So we will request now Deepshikha Khera to please read the story for us.
Am I audible to all?
Yes,
you hear me?
Yes,
Huh.
yes, 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 of course.
Okay, fine. Right. So this is Khol Do by Manto. अमृतसर से स्पेशल ट्रेन दोपहर 2 बजे को चली और 8 घंटों के बाद मुगलपुरा पहुंची। रास्ते में कई आदमी मारे गए, मुतअद्दिद जख्मी हुए और कुछ इधर उधर भटक गए। जब सिराजुद्दीन ने आंखें खोली और अपने चारों तरफ मर्दों, औरतों और बच्चों का एक मुतलातम समंदर देखा, तो उसकी सोचने समझने की कुव्वतें और भी ज़ईफ हो गईं। वो देर तक गदले आसमान को टकटकी बांधे देखता रहा। यूं तो कैंप में हर तरफ शोर बरपा था, लेकिन बूढ़े सिराजुद्दीन के कान जैसे बंद थे। उसे कुछ सुनाई नहीं देता था। कोई उसे देखता तो ये ख्याल करता कि वो किसी गहरी फिक्र में गर्क है, मगर ऐसा नहीं था। उसके होशो हवास शल थे, उसका सारा वजूद खला में मुअल्लक था। गदले आसमान की तरफ बगैर किसी इरादे के देखते देखते सिराजुद्दीन की निगाहें सूरज से टकराईं। तेज रोशनी उसके वजूद के रगो रेशे में उतर गई और वो जाग उठा। ऊपर तले उसके दिमाग पर कई तस्वीरें दौड़ गईं। लूट, आग, भागम भाग, स्टेशन, गोलियां, रात और सकीना। सिराजुद्दीन एकदम उठ खड़ा हुआ और पागलों की तरह उसने अपने चारों तरफ फैले हुए इंसानों के समंदर को खंगालना शुरू किया। पूरे 3 घंटे वो सकीना सकीना पुकारता कैंप में खाक छानता रहा, मगर उसे अपनी जवान इकलौती बेटी का कोई पता न मिला। चारों तरफ एक धांधली सी मची थी। कोई अपना बच्चा ढूंढ रहा था, कोई माँ, कोई बीवी और कोई बेटी। सिराजुद्दीन थक हार कर एक तरफ बैठ गया और हाफिजे पर जोर देकर सोचने लगा कि सकीना उससे कब और कहां जुदा हुई। लेकिन सोचते सोचते उसका दिमाग सकीना की माँ की लाश पर जम जाता, जिसकी सारी अंतड़ियां बाहर निकली हुई थी। इससे आगे वो और कुछ न सोच सकता। सकीना की माँ मर चुकी थी। उसने सिराजुद्दीन की आंखों के सामने ही दम तोड़ा था। लेकिन सकीना कहाँ थी, जिसके मुतल्लक उसकी माँ ने मरते हुए कहा था, मुझे छोड़ो और सकीना को लेकर जल्दी यहां से भाग जाओ। सकीना उसके साथ ही थी। दोनों नंगे पांव भाग रहे थे। सकीना का दुपट्टा गिर पड़ा था। उसे उठाने के लिए उसने रुकना चाहा था, मगर सकीना ने चिल्लाकर कहा था, अब्बा जी छोड़िए। लेकिन उसने दुपट्टा उठा लिया था। ये सोचते सोचते उसने अपने कोट की उभरी हुई जेब की तरफ देखा और उसमें हाथ डालकर एक कपड़ा निकाला। सकीना का वही दुपट्टा था, लेकिन सकीना कहाँ थी? सिराजुद्दीन ने अपने थके हुए दिमाग पर बहुत जोर दिया, मगर वो किसी नतीजे पर न पहुंच सका। क्या वो सकीना को अपने साथ स्टेशन तक ले आया था? क्या वो उसके साथ ही गाड़ी में सवार थी? रास्ते में जब गाड़ी रोकी गई थी और बलवाई अंदर घुस आए थे, तो क्या वो बेहोश हो गया था जो वो सकीना को उठा कर ले गए? सिराजुद्दीन के दिमाग में सवाल ही सवाल थे, जवाब कोई भी नहीं था। उसको हमदर्दी की जरूरत थी, लेकिन चारों तरफ जितने भी इंसान फैले थे, सबको हमदर्दी की जरूरत थी। सिराजुद्दीन ने रोना चाहा, मगर आंखों ने उसकी मदद न की। आंसू जाने कहां गायब हो गए थे। 6 रोज के बाद जब होशो हवास किसी कदर दुरुस्त हुए, तो सिराजुद्दीन उन लोगों से मिला जो उसकी मदद करने के लिए तैयार थे। 8 नौजवान थे जिनके पास लॉरी थी, बंदूकें थी। सिराजुद्दीन ने उनको लाख लाख दुआएं दी और सकीना का हुलिया बताया। गोरा रंग है और बहुत ही खूबसूरत है, मुझ पर नहीं अपनी माँ पर है। उम्र 17 बरस के करीब है, आंखें बड़ी बड़ी और बाल स्याह है। दाहिने गाल पर मोटा सा तिल। मेरी इकलौती लड़की है, ढूंढ लाओ, तुम्हारा खुदा भला करेगा। रजाकार नौजवानों ने बड़े जज्बे के साथ बूढ़े सिराजुद्दीन को यकीन दिलाया कि अगर उसकी बेटी जिंदा हुई तो चंद ही दिनों में उसके पास होगी। 8 नौजवानों ने कोशिश की। जान हथेली पर रखकर वो अमृतसर गए। कई औरतों, मर्दों और कई बच्चों को निकाल निकाल कर उन्होंने महफूज मकामों पर पहुंचाया। 10 रोज गुजर गए, मगर उन्हें सकीना कहीं ना मिली। एक रोज वो उसी खिदमत के लिए लारी पर अमृतसर जा रहे थे कि चिहाटा के पास सड़क पर उन्हें एक लड़की दिखाई दी। लारी की आवाज सुनकर वह बिदकी और भागना शुरू कर दिया। रजाकारों ने मोटर रोकी और सब के सब उसके पीछे भागे। ایک کھیت میں انہوں نے لڑکی کو پکڑ لیا. دیکھا تو بہت خوبصورت تھی. داہنے گال پر موٹا تل بھی تھا. ایک لڑکے نے اسے کہا, گھبراؤ نہیں, کیا تمہارا نام سکینہ ہے؟ لڑکی کا رنگ اور بھی زرد ہو گیا. اس نے کوئی جواب نہ دیا, لیکن جب تمام لڑکوں نے اسے دم دلاسا دیا تو اس کی وحشت دور ہوئی اور اس نے مان لیا کہ وہ سراج الدین کی بیٹی سکینہ ہے. 8 رضاکار نوجوانوں نے ہر طرح سکینہ کی دلجوئی کی. اسے کھانا کھلایا, دودھ پلایا اور لوری میں بٹھا دیا. ایک نے اپنا کوٹ اتار کر اسے دیا, کیونکہ دوپٹہ نہ ہونے کے باعث وہ بہت الجھن محسوس کر رہی تھی اور بار بار باہوں سے اپنے سینے کو ڈھانکنے کی ناکام کوشش میں مصروف تھی. کئی دن گزر گئے. سراج الدین کو سکینہ کی کوئی خبر نہ ملی. وہ دن بھر مختلف کیمپوں اور دفتروں کے چکر کاٹتا رہتا, لیکن کہیں سے بھی اس کی بیٹی کا پتہ نہ چلا. رات کو وہ بہت دیر تک ان رضاکار نوجوانوں کی کامیابی کے لیے دعائیں مانگتا رہتا, جنہوں نے اس کو یقین دلایا تھا کہ اگر سکینہ زندہ ہوئی تو چند ہی دنوں میں وہ اسے ڈھونڈ نکالیں گے. ایک روز سراج الدین نے کیمپ میں ان نوجوان رضاکاروں کو دیکھا. لوری میں بیٹھے تھے. سراج الدین بھاگا بھاگا ان کے پاس گیا. لوری چلنے ہی والی تھی کہ اس نے پوچھا, بیٹا میری سکینہ کا پتہ چلا؟ سب نے یک زبان ہو کر کہا, چل جائے گا, چل جائے گا, اور لاری چلا دی. سراج الدین نے ایک بار پھر ان نوجوانوں کی کامیابی کے لیے دعا مانگی اور اس کا جی کسی قدر ہلکا ہو گیا. شام کے قریب کیمپ میں جہاں سراج الدین بیٹھا تھا اس کے پاس ہی کچھ گڑبڑ سی ہوئی. 4 آدمی کچھ اٹھا کر لا رہے تھے. اس نے دریافت کیا تو معلوم ہوا کہ ایک لڑکی ریلوے لائن کے پاس بے ہوش پڑی تھی. لوگ اسے اٹھا کر لائے ہیں. سراج الدین ان کے پیچھے پیچھے ہو لیا. لوگوں نے لڑکی کو ہسپتال والوں کے سپرد کیا اور چلے گئے. کچھ دیر وہ ایسے ہی ہسپتال کے باہر گڑھے ہوئے لکڑی کے کھمبے کے ساتھ لگ کر کھڑا رہا. پھر آہستہ آہستہ اندر چلا گیا. کمرے میں کوئی بھی نہیں تھا. ایک اسٹریچر تھا جس پر ایک لاش پڑی تھی. سراج الدین چھوٹے چھوٹے قدم اٹھاتا اس کی طرف بڑھا. کمرے میں دفعتاً روشنی ہوئی. سراج الدین نے لاش کے زرد چہرے پر چمکتا ہوا تل دیکھا اور چلایا, سکینہ! ڈاکٹر نے, جس نے کمرے میں روشنی کی تھی, سراج الدین سے پوچھا, کیا ہے؟ سراج الدین کے حلق سے صرف اس قدر نکل سکا, جی میں اس کا باپ ہوں. ڈاکٹر نے اسٹریچر پر پڑی ہوئی لاش کی طرف دیکھا, اس کی نبض ٹٹولی اور سراج الدین سے کہا, کھڑکی کھول دو. سکینہ کے مردہ جسم میں جنبش پیدا ہوئی. بے جان ہاتھوں سے اس نے اظہار بند کھولا اور سلوار نیچے سرکا دی. بوڑھا سراج الدین خوشی سے چلایا, زندہ ہے, میری بیٹی زندہ ہے. ڈاکٹر سر سے پیر تک پسینے میں غرق ہو گیا.
Thank you very much. Deepshikha, it's a very poignant story to my mind, and I don't know why in those days it was considered as one of the controversial stories. I think the irony at the end of the story is very touching.
Absolutely.
And I
Gives
think
you goosebumps.
the hallmark of many of his stories, the way he ends them. Dr. Narang, please, we would like you to now make your observations about the controversial stories of Manto, the obscenity in them, if there is any, and what kind of defense he was able to make for himself in those days. Dr. Narang.
If you don't mind, I want to take a couple of minutes to react to this story. Right. I have a very different take on this story from whatever I have seen written by other people. So I seek your indulgence for a couple of minutes. First, I want to say it's a very poignant story and very sensitively read by Deepshikha. Thank you very much, Deepshikha.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have translated this story like dozens of people who have translated this story.
Yeah.
Most of them have titled it Open, Open Up, or around that in a literal translation. My take on this story is very different, which is evident from the title which I gave to my translation. It is published in that book which was mentioned by Guru Updesh Ji, Manto My Love. My title for the story is My Daughter is Alive. This is, to my mind, a very different story. Friends, when Deepshikha was reading that, I noted there is a thread which runs throughout the story, which people tend to ignore because Manto played with that word Kholdo and they got lost in it. They got lost in it. The double spin of semantics which Manto put on the word Kholdo, referring to the window, being referred to the window by the doctor, and the poor girl unconsciously, literally unconscious, opens up Dagman. Friends, remember when he recalls that when Sakina's mother was dying, she told her, "Mujhe chodo, Sakina ko lekar bhag jao." She was, even in her death, she was worried about her daughter.
Her daughter.
Number two, when they were running and when Sakina's dupatta got caught in something, he tried to retract it and Sakina said, "Chodo na." He doesn't leave. He takes that dupatta, puts in his pocket, and later on in the camp, recalling Sakina, he suddenly takes it out of his coat pocket. Friends, to me, this is a story of filial love.
Absolutely.
He is not bothered at all what has gone on with his daughter. We are all worried. He thinks she's dead because wahan ek lash padi thi stretcher. The moment he sees some harkat, he is not bothered. He is on cloud 9. Meri beti zinda hai. The doctor who doesn't know the context, he becomes, he feels very odd and he perspires. What is this old man talking? What has this girl gone through? He's not bothered. He's not bothered. The fact that Sakina is alive, that he is able to fulfill the promise which his dying wife took from him is what matters. That is my take on this story. Now, friends, about the as suggested by Guptesh, about the obscene stories and his that is the most crucial part of Manto's oeuvre, and an oeuvre which has been questioned not by readers, not by critics alone, but also by the courts. The charges against him were that he wrote obscenely, that he wrote obscenity. In fact, when he died, I think it was one of the leading critics of Pakistan who says, good riddance. He was a prince of obscenity who is dead. And in fact, they were shocked why there were meetings and tributes being paid to him. Now, look at the stories which have been called as obscene. I will take one story, refer to two more, and show how Manto himself defended. In fact, he filed written defenses. Uske tahriri bayanat hai, which he filed the courts defending himself. Take the story. It was one of these stories which was called for obscenity and court case slapped. Dhua is the story of, what's the boy's name? Maqsood, I think. Maqsood. He is a young pubescent boy of 12 or 13 who is undergoing puberty and just doesn't understand what is happening to his body and perhaps also to his mind. He is going to school, and when he sees a skinned goat being hung in a butcher's shop, out of which, the smoke is still coming out. It is cold, and also perhaps it has been skinned just a few minutes ago. He has very strange kind of feelings. He can't understand, why those feelings are within him by looking at that skinned goat. He comes home, and his sister Kulsum says she has a big pain in her back and asked him to press her back. And while pressing the back, he goes on to her legs and her thighs. And he has a very strange kind of feeling while pressing her thighs, and Kulsum also has a very different kind of feeling. It is here that they said that he was writing obscenity, you know, pressing the thighs of his sister and so on. But they forget that the next sentence that Manto wrote was, Maqsood thought, how would Kulsum look if she were also skinned and hung upside down? Will smoke also come out of her body as he had seen with the goat? Now tell me, is that obscenity? Manto said, and please mark what he said. He says, किसी भी जुबान में कोई भी लफ्ज फुआश नहीं होते हैं. There are no obscene words in a language. It is their usage, the metaphors, words, the expressions, even things that can be turned into obscene. In fact, recall Freud, please, who used to go to his lecture and tell his students, look at everything in this room for the last time as innocent things. After my lecture, nothing would remain innocent. And what is Manto trying to do? The metaphor he uses there is of dhua, of fog, of smoke, of everything being hazy, because this child doesn't know what is happening to him. It's all hazy in his head. How is this obscene? This is the defense he put for that. Look at another story, Thanda Gosht. There are Ishar Singh and Kulwant who use very abusive language, Maya, Pehnya, and it was said that he uses abusive language. Manto's defense was, if I had used sanitized language for these two crude people, it would be very artificial. This is the natural manner of communication that these people use. And look at the way, how carefully he avoids writing what you call as nude, frank scenes of sexual act. When they are in bed and are in sexual act, he uses the metaphor of shuffling a deck of cards. Ishar se bahut phek chuka, phek. You know how careful he was, and they called him obscene. Take the story Boo, and I will end this section with that. Boo is a story of a man in Bombay who once gets a ghatan, one of the tribal women for lower classes, to sleep with her. And after sleeping with her, the only thing he remembers is the smell of perspiration from her underarms. This stays with him all the time until he is with his newly wedded wife in bed, and then he recalls that smell. Friends, I want to draw your attention to the fact that decades later, the concept of pheromones was discovered, where people said that really the smell of perspiration is a big motivation for sex. Manto was decades ahead of that time. In all these cases, he was exonerated by the courts. I want to give you one small instance where the prosecution vakil, the prosecution lawyer, told the judge Lala Santram, sub-judge in Lahore, sir, he uses abusive words. And Lala Santram said, for example, sir, he says he uses the word ashik. Lala Santram smiled. How is that obscene? He says, okay, Vakil Saab, why don't you suggest another word for it? Vakil thought for a second and said, yaar kaisa rahega? So this is where these cases were dismissed, except for one in which he was fed up coming to the courts again and again. Therefore, he paid that little fine, like our own Prashant Bhushan paid 1 rupee and got token money from the courts.
Yeah.
Friends, Manto also said that you tell me there are men and there are women and there are relationships with them. Are men obscene? Are women obscene? Are relationships between them obscene? No, it is the way you describe them. If you describe them to draw some kind of baser instincts and titillating feelings, then it is obscenity. It is not otherwise. He says, tell me, if I have to talk about the breasts of a woman, can I call them peanuts? Can I call them a table? Can I call them a razor?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's right.
so he said, I describe life as it exists. Prostitutes, people said, why do you have to think of just prostitutes and nothing else? Can't you find anything better? Is nali aur mori ke siwa aapko kuch nahi dikhta? He said, friends, writers, when they get hurt somewhere, they write. When they see something which provokes them, they write. He says, if the society wants writers not to write about prostitutes, and you and I know, great books of literature have been written by writers across the globe, making prostitutes the prime characters. Manto said, if you want writers not to write about them, abolish, do away with the institution of prostitution, and automatically writers won't write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I think there is, new to say about it, that during his own time, Manto was quite notorious, and he was unacceptable to many people. In the last, I think, 2 or 3 decades, we have seen that he's being rehabilitated. He has been reinvented as one of the great radical, progressive writer. How does this, changeover or makeover happens? Would you like to tell us how critics have come to understand him better now?
Well, if you allow me, I will preface that by another story. You see, I'm basically a storyteller.
Storyteller.
I will only tell you stories, you can draw your inferences, and I'll come to the point as suggested by you. The story is like this. When Boo was published, one of the doyens of progressive writers movement, Ali Sardar Jafri, wrote a very, very praiseworthy review of the story, calling it one of the great stories, etc., etc. And then he must have gone to one of the meetings of Progressive Writers Association in Mumbai, where he was taken to task. It is such a filthy story, talking of nothing but sex and perspiration and so on. What have you done? And Ali Sardar Jafri, within a week, wrote another story condemning the same story, Boo. I don't think there is another record of a story having received 2 totally opposite reviews by the same writer.
Yeah.
But that speaks volumes about the hypocrisy of Manto's contemporary writers, progressives included, and the critics. Manto, in fact, wrote that a writer, as I mentioned earlier, writes whatever he sees around. And Manto did not want to focus attention on a certain section of the society deliberately. And as a corollary, he wanted to focus his attention on certain sections of society. Preeti ji mentioned that people on the margins, people who survive, and those people who are societally disadvantaged, and so on. So that was by choice. Call it Manto's worldview. Call it Manto's ideology. And this is what makes him a great writer. He did not mince words about him. Why do we realize his relevance today? Manto was an iconoclast. You remember he has a book of sketches which he called Ganje Farishte, where he says, wherein he's written about people, और उसने कहा या गंजों का भी मुंडन कर दिया मैंने. And Manto wrote so very frankly about even the most celebrated. And in today's circumstances, I'm talking of the subcontinent, whether it is India or Bangladesh or Pakistan and so on. We need Manto again.
Yes.
We need Manto again. Who would do mundan, or who would shave off these so-called bigwigs and what they are doing to the nation. Manto could not be, let me make these two small points. Manto could not be recognized as a great writer in India for the following three reasons immediately after he went to Pakistan. He had learnt his ropes here. He had honed his craft of story writing to near perfection here, and yet he was not recognized. Why? Number one, when he went away, he got lost in the melee of millions who had gone away. He was just one of them. He had not become famous like Josh Saab, so that Pandit Nehru would appeal to Josh Saab, mat jaiye. Manto was not appealed by anyone. Number two, India was busy in reconstructing itself, not just reconstructing the millions who had come here and had become what they called as refugees. But India was more importantly grappling at that point of time from its truncated identity. The nation was not what it was 6 months ago. Third, Pakistan had played a big politics in making Urdu the state language of Pakistan. And as a corollary, Urdu became a lingua non, not a favorite language, let's put it this way, lingua non grata for Indians. So he was an Urdu writer. Apparently he won't have been. It took a lot of time for India to recognize the depth and the significance of Manto's writing, which finally they did. Remember, Sahitya Akademi, which is primarily for Indian writers and doesn't take up writings by foreign writers, published a monograph by Waris Alvi on Manto, held seminars, so many seminars on him, and I've had the privilege of getting my book published from them. This is one of the most vociferous official recognitions of Manto, and that to my mind. And in Pakistan, Pakistan unfortunately became a religious state, and Manto did not like state politics to be mixed with religion. He destroyed the reputation of many. And so in Pakistan also initially, you know, the extremists, the religionists, the Maulanas and the Maulvis went after him. In fact, his story, Boo, was under a case, court case for a very interesting reason, for disturbing public peace.
Yeah.
Imagine that. So Pakistan also took its own time, but I'm glad belatedly they recognize him. The world recognizes Manto as one of its great assets.
Yeah, good, thank you. Now, I think one of the reasons why he has become such a popular writer is that his art of storytelling is also very unique. The way he builds up the story, the characters that he chooses, the language that he gives to these characters, and the ending especially. Do you think his art of storytelling is also in some way contributive to his making a great writer?
I think in a big way, And like any great writer, he was a very conscious artist. It was not by accident that he chose his characters. I've already spoken, he deliberately chose the people from the margin as his central characters, and particularly prostitutes as prima donnas. I've spoken about that. But let me draw your attention to the fact that Manto also wrote about the craft of story writing, his own craft of story writing. He has a very significant essay called Main Afsana Kyun Kar Likhta? Why and how do I write a story? Wherein he recreates, I would say, the physical and the psychic environment in which he creates his story. Let me give you some details about that. You know, he talks about the environment, the physical environment in which he writes. Let me read out a couple of lines. I sit down on the sofa in my room, keep the paper and pen in front of me, say Bismillah, and start writing a story. My 3 daughters are making noise around me. I talk to them, also mediate in their occasional quarrels. I prepare a salad for myself, pay host to a visitor who drops by, but I go on writing the story. Reminds me of that famous Nigerian woman writer, Buchi Amachanta, who wrote her great novels in the kitchen while cooking and looking after 5 small children in a socially disadvantaged given house, and so on. And as for the psychic environment, he says, it doesn't always come to me to write stories. He says, sometimes the story doesn't come to me. I smoke cigarette after cigarette, the story doesn't come out of my mind. Finally, I sit down like, he has a very sexist metaphor, as simile, which I don't agree with. He says, finally, I lie down like a barren woman. I change sides, get up, feed my pet sparrows, push to and fro, children who are sitting on the swing, clear the litter lying around, collect and place in one corner the shoes of my children, but the story lying in my pocket doesn't come out. I feel miserable, he says. At that point of time, he says, his wife says, leave all this. Why don't you pick up the pen and start writing? And he says, and I start writing, and finally the story, which is lying in my pocket, jumps out of and comes on its own. That is his craft. About the endings and other things, and the turns and twists, which are typical Manto strokes.
Yes.
I would draw your attention to a radio play which he wrote when he was with All India Radio Delhi. It is called Aao Kahani Likhe. It's a very interesting radio play in which there are 3 characters, a husband and a wife, Kishore and Lajwanti, and their friend Narayan. The 3 of them are trying to write one story, common story. And what the wife is trying to do is, whatever the husband says, through one-man upmanship, she tries to twist it towards him and blame him. And Manto very cleverly always kind of deviates his wife's observations on the story to something very unexpected, and she gets desperate. And she says, I'll kill you. That's what Manto is. And about the endings, friends.
Yeah.
His endings, we all know, are very unexpected.
Yeah,
And this is a part of his strategy.
I would like you to tell us something about the ending of Kali Salwar, which to my mind is very, very touching, because the prostitute is also, in a way, a religious person. Would you like to tell something about the ending of Kali Salwar?
Well, of course, as you have said, I believe that so. But to my mind, the endings of stories like Toba Tek Singh are really more important. You know, look at that story. Manto, when he went to Pakistan for 3 months, could not do anything. To his friend Ahmad Nadeem Kasmi, he wrote, मेरी तबीयत ही कुछ नहीं करती थी, घंटों बैठा रहता था मेज पे, कुछ लिख ही नहीं सकता था. Then he started gradually writing small humorous pieces like नाक की किस्में, दीवारों पर लिखना, etc., दो गड़े, etc., etc. He raised all those questions with Manto's Bishan Singh raises. The questions what? हिंदुस्तान कहाँ है, पाकिस्तान कहाँ है, जो हिंदुस्तान था आज तक वो पाकिस्तान कैसे बन गया, पाकिस्तान में क्या क्या तकसीम होगा. Recently I have seen a very good photograph. In one of the libraries, the library assistant is separating the books in the library. Left hand side, books for Pakistan. Right hand side, books for Hindustan. And it so confuses Bishan Singh that ultimately he decides not to live.
Yes.
Not to live. He dies on the no man land. No man's land is significant because he doesn't know whether he's a Pakistani or Hindustani. He was Hindustani a month ago. He was in Pakistan and a Hindustani. Now he's in Pakistan and he's a Hindustani. Why does Manto choose such endings? And Kali Salwar you have mentioned. Look at the ending. Look at the ending of Thanda Gosht. She kills him.
Thanda gosht.
Yes.
She kills him with the kirpan. And then he says, he reveals the fact that she was dead and that's why he's lost his masculinity. Think of Kholdo, with Deep Shikha just now. Okay. You know why does he do this? Thomas Hardy once said, a good story slaps you into a new awareness. I'm quoting him.
Yes.
Manto keeps on slapping you one after another into a new awareness.
One after.
Thanks for choosing that title for your discussion today. Manto matters. Manto matters because
Manto matters.
he keeps on slapping us into new awareness. We need him today more than ever before.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I can just add on to what you're saying is the example of the story, 10 rupees, if you can recall.
To be honest, I can't recall at this moment.
Yeah. So 10 rupees was very interesting. It's a young girl who has been pushed into prostitution.
Prostitution.
By her mother. But then she's young and she's kind of still loves the good things of life as young people do. So one of these days a Seth comes and takes her to whatever, they normally do with these girls. But then, on the way, the boys who were supposed to do things with her, they fall asleep. And she takes a good round of the city along the beach side. And on the way back, one of the boys, he puts 10 rupees in her pocket. And she keeps thinking, when she gets out of the car and she's about to go to her home, he pulls out those 10 rupees and puts it back into his pocket. He says, why are you doing this? He says, no, I have done nothing to earn this money. Look at this. And this is such an ennobling thought. Even prostitutes have some kind of... Because he's very young. And
how hard does he hit you on your nose?
Yes, that's very, very important. Well, thank you very much for doing this wonderful session. I think Manto, in fact, comes alive when you read it in your peace, in your leisure time. And I think his language is extremely beautiful.
Will you allow me 2 remarks about Manto in his own words?
Yes.
Manto was asked, why does he write stories? He says, I write stories because if I don't write, I feel like not having put on any clothes. He says, I am addicted to writing stories as much as I am addicted to drinking. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we all enjoyed a very beautiful session, and I think it couldn't be any better than this. Now the house is open for questions. I have already got one question from Kanika Atri. I'm going to read it to you. And I think chat box is full of compliments to you, Dr. Narang. They are all very happy about what you have told them. They find it very illuminating. The question that Kanika has asked is, what is it that this rape culture of not only women, but even young girls and even infants has still not disappeared? This rape culture has not disappeared. Where is the lack of every culture which is failing to teach men to respect this other gender? This is a general question. It's not about Manto in all, but what she wants to know is that why do we have still this thing as one of the major attacks on women?
You see, I am not surprised. I am not surprised because the basic fact of treating women as property has not gone away from society, any society.
Even now.
Including us. The Constitution talks of no discrimination on the basis of gender. But look around. I will start with the most important institution, marriage. And ये वो हमाम है जिसमें हम सब नंगे हैं.
Yes.
In marriage, don't we sell a daughter? Don't we sell a daughter? What is dowry? Don't we, from the time we are bringing up children, a boy and a girl, don't we discriminate in favor of the boy all the time as parents? And later on, when all these unfortunate things happen to girls, we review and we complain. We have prepared our menfolk for the most despicable behavior.
Yes.
That is one thing. The other is that we must remember in this mind of humans reside both the devil and God, whatever you may like to call it. And it is the nurture which foregrounds one or the other. And therefore, by foregrounding masculinity, man, male hegemony, we are foregrounding the devil in him. And there is no depth to which devil cannot descend. In fact, he lives in the depths.
Well, I think if you want, I can read some of the compliments that have.
I think there's somebody got a hand up.
Yeah, well, Dr.
Kamlesh
Gurudesh,
Mohan.
yeah. I'm just going to unmute Dr. Kamlesh Mohan from Chandigarh.
Okay, right.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
And somebody is asking about symbolism. Guru Pratap is asking, I think. Toba Tek Singh.
Please.
Sorry?
I think there's a hand raised, and
Yeah,
I think
Kamlesh Mohanji is going to, ask you something.
Okay.
Please, Kamlesh, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah.
And Mr. Harish Narang's lecture was very revealing about Manto. But I would like to say that when are we going to give up these double standards? Because, rape is one instance. If we tell the boys, come home early, the girls will be safe. But instead we tell the girls, come home early, then you will be safe. So I think it is a process of socialization, how we bring up boys and girls, that really creates a problem. So when are we going to sort out this problem of socialization? या लड़के और लड़कियों की परवरिश को कब हम बदलेंगे और कब हम औरत को सिर्फ जिस्म ही समझते रहेंगे? वो औरत जिसका जिस्म माँ बनने के लिए तो हमें मंजूर है, लेकिन जब वो इंडिपेंडेंट हो जाती है तब हम उसको नहीं दर्जा देते, तब हम उसको रेप करना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि वो अपने आप में एक अलग आइडेंटिटी ना बने। यही हमारे देवी देवताओं का हाल है, जब औरत जो है वो अलग।
Is there a question, Kamlesh?
Is her observation I will reply to.
No.
Yes, and because we don't have too much time now, so
all right, I've got the import of your observation.
How do the writers can help us in changing the socialization process itself?
You see, Frantz Fanon had a hypothesis. That hypothesis about colonizers and the colonized was that through persistent colonization, the colonizers, the colonized internalize the discourse of the colonizer and speak their language. My late father used to say, "Beta, Angrez Bahadur ka Raj bahut acha tha." My little foot, they came and colonized us and unka Raj acha tha. That was a typical example of a colonized mind who was otherwise a very progressive person, but in this observation. Now, man-woman relationship in the society, the distribution of power in that society is so unequal in favor of males that women themselves at times have internalized that male hegemonic discourse like the colonizers' discourse. Writers can intervene only up to a small extent. They do intervene, they do show. But if a woman, as a mother, discriminates between a male child and a female child, she is reinforcing that stereotype from the very child. As you rightly said, parvarish. This is nurture. This is what I call nurture. So long as this equality does not go away from the minds of the people, including from the minds of the women, these rapes unfortunately will continue to happen. Men will treat them as property, and with property you can do anything.
I think Guru Pratap has a question. about Toba Tek Singh and the symbolism.
Yeah. Can I read out the question?
Yes, please.
The question is, could you please talk a little about symbolism in Toba Tek Singh?
I have in fact in a way answered that question, except the word symbol. I have used the word metaphor. Toba Tek Singh, the person, that is Bishan Singh, who came to be known as Toba Tek Singh because he came from a place called Toba Tek Singh. There is a place in Pakistan called Toba Tek Singh. He becomes a symbol of the victimization of that psychic chaos. I'm not talking the physical chaos, the psychic chaos which the physical chaos created. He becomes a symbol of that. And not just that. Look at the symbols Manto employs to underline this character or his symbolization. You remember that language, Opad di Gadgad, di Mung di Dal,
Ex di Bidhyana.
Vay Guruji,
Yeah.
etc.
Ex di Bidhyana.
Lot of people have tended to interpret it. Lot of translators have actually tried to translate it. But it is not the semantics which is important in Manto's eyes. In a person who as it is was in a madhouse, that is his mind was muddled, is further muddled by whatever is happening around. He can't make any sense out of it. And therefore, the language, which is one of the most rational, significant attainments of humans, gets entangled. Many things come to his mind at the same time, and they come out in the form of this apparently meaningless expression, but it is not meaningless. It is significant. Let's go beyond the semantics. The significance is the symbolic representation of that psychic confusion which the entire nation suffered from. Let me draw your attention from a simile that Manto used for his own inaction, his own paralysis. He says, मैं अपने घर में बैठा रहता था when he came to Pakistan. मुझे लगता था मेरे दिमाग में एक फिल्म चल रही है जिसमें बहुत सारी फिल्में गड्ढमड हो गई हैं. That's his word. कभी बंबई के छकड़े, कभी कराची की छोटी ट्रामें, कभी ये और कभी वो. So this expression is again a symbol of that. And look at the ending. This is symbolic that the best place to be in at that point of time was to be in no man's land.
Yes, yes.
Well, I think probably lots and lots of appreciations for this wonderful session, and all the applause to Dr. Narang and of course Deep Shikha. You have taken everybody's heart out, and everybody is appreciating the way you narrated the story. It was like that Manto himself was there and narrating the whole of the story. And Dr. Gurubdev Singh sir, it was a wonderful session moderated by you. And of course, people are so happy and they are interested to have more such programs on the platform of Maja House. And I take this opportunity to thank all of you, all the participants and the moderator, Dr. Gurubdev Singh sir, Preeti ji, of course, and Deep Shikha, and bundle of thanks, sir. Loads and loads of thanks to Dr. Narang for such a deep, I can read out that really this whole discussion has hit me deep down. This was a purpose that we can learn something from the writers, and of course we can do something good for the society. And on behalf of the Maja House, I think probably it's already 7:20 now, and we should be off. And let me invite all of you for tomorrow's program, that is Saja Punjab, under the banner of Maja House. we'll be discussing the twin cities Amritsar and Lahore.
Lahore.
But of course, Manto would again be highlighted in that tomorrow's session, where we would be having Syed Mahmood Gilani, former Deputy General, Advocate General of Pakistan, solicitor, practitioner, and writer, poet, radio jockey. And tomorrow, I assure you, the audience, tomorrow you will be able to meet a 98-year-old Baba Dina also narrating the pre-partition, the episodes of the twin cities, sister cities, Lahore and Amritsar. So hope we'll be catching up with you tomorrow. And thank you so very much. And I would request each and everyone who has joined for the first time, we have given the form in that chat box. I'll just put it again. So you can just register yourself so that we can update you on our next programs and you can join us. And that is the purpose of the Maja House. Please do join. And yes, and thank you so very much. Thank you, participants. Thank you, Dr. Narang. Thank you, Maja House. Thank you, Deep Shikha. Thank you, Dr. Guru. Thank you so very much. Goodbye and good night to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji.
Thank you very much, Professor Narang, for being here with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to be with all of you. Thank you, Gurupdesh.